This is the gospel for Diaconal. He also said, the kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground and would sleep and rise night and day, and indeed would sprout and grow. He does not know how. The earth produces of itself, first the stalk, then the head, then the full grain in the head. But when the grain is ripe, at once he goes in with his sickle, because the harvest has come. He also said, with what can we compare the kingdom of God? Or what parable will be used for it? It is like a mustard seed, which, when sown upon the ground, is the smallest of all seeds on the earth. Yet when it is sown, it grows up and becomes the greatest of all shrubs, and puts forth large branches, so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade. With many such parables he spoke the word to them, as they were able to hear it. He did not speak to them except in parables, but he explained everything in private to his disciples. This is the gospel of the Lord. We see it. Grace, mercy, and peace be with you in the name of the risen Savior, Jesus Christ. Last summer, my cousin Patrick and I took a week-long vacation to Washington State. While we were there, we wanted to pack in as much as we could into our vacation because there is so much to see and experience in that part of the country. We spent a few days in Seattle and then we moved on to Mount Rainier National Park. And then we ended our trip by exploring the Lake National Park. It was my first time in the Pacific Northwest. And the whole time that I was there, I just kept thinking about how amazed I was by the natural beauty of that particular country. One memory from that trip that specifically comes to mind to me when I think back on it is driving into Mount Rainier National Park. As we entered the park, we were surrounded by a lush green rainforest. It was so beautiful. There were these big conifer trees that created a canopy over the ground where there were ferns and mosses. It was so green. And then we eventually drove out of the rainforest into the subalpines of the park, just at the higher elevation. And there were meadows of wildflowers and grasses. And again, it was beautiful. And I was just in awe the whole time that I was in the park. I've been thinking a lot about nature recently and just how vast and how great God's creation is. Summer is my favorite season because it gives me more opportunities to be outside. And I love being outdoors. I find it to be very freeing, busy. Lately, I've been taking more intentional time to be in creation and to be really present in nature, whether it's been at firelight on Wednesday nights or just simply taking a walk around my neighborhood on the trail that runs through it. When I spend time outside, I get reminded about how life is a beautiful mystery. In our gospel text today from Mark, Jesus tells two parables that uses images of nature, so seeds and plants, to illustrate what God's reign is like. The reign of God was at the center of Jesus' teachings, and he would even say that the reign of God is close at hand. Yep. But Jesus never gave a nice and concise definition of what the reign of God is. Instead, he used parables like the two that we have in Gospel reading today. He used these parables to tell stories about the mystery of God's reign. What Jesus wants us to know is that God's reign isn't associated with some specific time or place. It is something that we can experience here and now if we are open to viewing the world and our place in it in a different way than we normally do. In the two parables of our gospel reading today, Jesus uses images of agriculture to tell us something about how God is active in our world and in our everyday lives. We just need to be willing to notice them. In the first parable, Jesus tells us the story of a gardener. This gardener scatters seeds on the ground. And the gardener doesn't know how these seeds take root and how they grow. There's a mystery here. And it's a mystery that happens beneath the soil. But there's this road from the seed to the harvest, the seed to the plant. We can't see it. The gardener can't see it. It happens while the gardener is cleaning. Jesus begins with this parable to illustrate who God is. God is not distant from us. God is active in our world, creating life. There is nothing that we need to do, and there are no specific ways that we need to think to earn God's love. It's unconditional, and it is a gift. But it is a gift that we need to be open to receiving. Jesus tells us in his parable that when the grain has ripened, the gardener then comes in and cuts it from neighbors, because the harvest is. God's love and life are gifts, but we can fall into the trap of refusing them or cutting them off like the gardener in his parable. We do this when we choose the world's ways over God's way, right? It is easy for us to fall into despair when we look at the world around us. They see so much division and inequality and people hurting other people because they can't see that they can be worse of all people, that all people are children of God. And that breaks our heart because we see that so many people are suffering. But God invites us into a different way of being, where love and compassion are the foundation of life. God calls us to be participants in God's reign. This means to live like Jesus, who instead of fighting or beating back when people hurt him, he continued to show love, even on the cross. Jesus tells us that when we participate in the reign of God, we show love like this. We show love like Jesus. We allow God's reign to grow like a tiny mustard seed that transforms into a large tree. While we might be familiar with the parable of the mustard seed, it likely shocked the first people who heard this story. In Jesus' time, mustard shrubs were not exactly considered these beautiful plants that left people in. They were more of an invasive weed, and they just took up space that maybe more valuable plants could grow in. So why would Jesus tell a story about God's reign being like an invasive weed? Jesus uses this parable about a very ordinary plant to describe how the reign of God stretches and grows. And this plant that on the surface appears to be weed actually provides sanctuary for birds to make their nests. It has life-giving power. When we trust in God's presence and power in our world and in our own individual lives, we acknowledge that God is calling us to be co-creators of life. So what does this mean? Plant the seeds of God's reign and nurture them with your actions. Trust that God is the source of growth and transformation. Show love and generosity to one another. Celebrate differences. Instead of viewing differences as a threat, value that we all have unique gifts that God gives us to share God's love. In both parables of our gospel text today, Jesus paints a picture of how the reign of God is here and now, within all the ordinariness of life. Our role is to be open to being transformed by the love and life that God provides. To notice that God is active in our world and calling us into a new way of being where there is peace and love and unity instead of violence, fear, and division. When I think back on my trip to Washington last year, I am reminded that beautiful things do exist, despite the realities of the destruction and chaos in our world. Exploring the rainforests of the national parks is actually my favorite memory of the trip. I was in Washington while the devastating wildfires were burning across Canada. And these fires created this haze over the Pacific Northwest, and especially Washington. But the rainforests were a place where I found refuge and I could escape from. There is real life that is being perpetuated. We just have to open ourselves up to noticing it and allowing it to change our perspective. And my trip to Washington was just one of many experiences that I've had in nature that have left me in awe of the beauty of God's creation. You really don't have to go far to be immersed. In our world, where there is so much distraction and hurt, let us be reminded that the reign of God is here. While I see evidence of God's reign in nature, I also see it here at a mighty hope. I see it in the ways that you care so one to others. When I first started my internship, I was invited to attend several of your small groups. And right away, by being invited into those spaces, I saw the love that is in this community. I have been so moved by seeing the intentional relationships that you have built with one another. And I have also experienced so much love and care from you. I have seen and experienced not just welcoming, but a true invitation into something incredibly life-giving. Being here at this place gives me hope that the love and life that God intends for all people and all life creation can extend from this place and into the larger community and even across the world. This week, let us be reminded of our connection to the God of resurrection, the God who never gives up on life and is constantly transforming us and constantly making us new. And let us extend the love and life that we experience here into all the places that we find ourselves. Thanks be to God. Amen.